Excorde Media presents Catholicism 101 Essentials for the Journey with author and theologian Jeff Cavins. Lesson 8, Reconciliation. I must confess.
Let's talk a little bit about the effects of sin. I'm going to draw from an article which you will see at the very beginning of your workbook in your abbreviations on the first page, RP. Reconciliation and Penance. It's a document by John Paul II, an apostolic exhortation written in 1984, and it's called Reconciliation and Penance. It's a very small book. Boy, I'd really recommend that everybody get that little booklet and read that booklet and just completely take it in. It's so valuable. As John Paul II states in his exhortation, Reconciliation and Penance, sin is not merely to deny God. It's not merely to deny God. It's not to say, I deny that God is there. But sin is also to live as if He did not exist, to eliminate Him from one's daily life. That's pretty powerful, isn't it? To live as if He didn't exist. You know what? This is really a problem for us as Americans because we have everything that we need in life that makes it so easy to live as though He didn't exist. We can be entertained to death, fed to death. We can be pleasured to death. We can have leisure to death. We can live as though He didn't exist. There was a famous story of a Chinese missionary who came over to the United States to visit the church. And after returning to China, he was interviewed by the paper and asked, what was the most impressive thing about the church in America? And his answer was, what they can do without God. And then there is venial sin. Venial sin, which involves less serious matter, does not cut us off from God. It doesn't cut us off from the grace of God, the life of the Trinity, but it does weaken the grace in our souls and damages our relationship with God. And if not checked, can escalate into mortal sin. And so we're called on as Catholics, as Christians today, to continually check our own hearts, review our hearts. Where am I at? And we want to stop venial sin in the bud. Why? We don't want it becoming a habit. Once you have a habit, then you have to extricate that habit. That's harder than simply stopping something that's starting. So we're called to check our hearts regularly, go to confession, deal with that venial sin before it becomes a raging habit that will lead to mortal sin. And so the reason that we believe as Catholics that a priest in that confessional can say, I absolve you of all of your sins, is that because first God entrusted Jesus, and Jesus was a man and God, but God entrusted Jesus with this power to forgive, and then Jesus is going to entrust His apostles in John 20 with this gift to forgive, where He says, if you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven. If you retain the sins of any, they are retained. And so when we go to confession and we hear the words, I absolve you of all of your sins, we have to recognize that this authority was given to the priest by Jesus Christ, so that you could experience the freedom of release from sin. Just like in the Old Testament, the freedom from bondage in the great Exodus, Jesus in the New Covenant, He enters in and He leads the new Exodus and the release from sin and bondage. And He now gives us a sacrament, an encounter with Him in the sacrament of reconciliation to experience this on a regular basis.